Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Agenda 2063, the vision for Africa, the Africa we want. The African Union vision and the 7 aspirations emanate from extensive consultations from stakeholders cutting across all spheres of the African people. With these aspirations, the African people reflect their desire for shared prosperity and well being, for unity and integration, for a continent of free citizens and expanded horizons, where the full potentials of women and youth, boys and girls are realized, and with freedom from fear, disease, and want. The vision of the African Union is to become an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa driven by its citizens and representing a dynamic force in international arena. My name is Vera Sompon, and I'm going to be taking the host today and a conversation with Professor Alabi, who is going to be telling us more details on the content, the cost, and the challenges in achieving Agenda 2063. Professor, you're welcome to the debate again, and we are glad to have you with this very important conversation. When the African Union came up with this amazing program, the Africa We Want 2063, I don't know if they had thought about the cost, if they had all stakeholders, because we know stakeholders were involved, who were those that were involved. And now today you want to talk about the real meaning, the cost, and of course the challenge that is involved in achieving Agenda 2063. This is your platform, sir. You're welcome. Tell us who you are and more about the content today.
Thank you very much, Madam, for that beautiful introduction. My name is Reuben Alabi, and just like the moderator has said, I want to look at the content of this agenda, which is the type of Africa we want. I want to look at the cost implications of getting the agenda running and achieving the agenda. And of course, we will still elaborate a little bit on some of the challenges on the pathway to achieving this agenda. As Madam has rightly said, the agenda is a desire for all the Africans to have a shared prosperity and well-being, and for the unity and integrations of the continent, where the citizens are free to trade and to move among themselves, and where the full potentials of Africans are realized with freedom from fear, diseases, and want. So the Africans are committed to act together to achieve this noble agenda and aspiration. And I want us to take note of one thing right from the beginning. It's good to aspire, but we need to perspire to get our desire. Aspiration should not be the end on its own. There should be a perspiration. Perspiration is to work towards that aspiration. So it will become a desire. And that's why we need to look at the content, the cost implications, and the challenges that are related to these aspirations and this agenda. Let me first of all briefly give us some information on this agenda. That the aspirations included, there are some of the aspirations that are included in this agenda. Number one is that we want Africa that is based on inclusive growth and sustainable development, because it is on that basis that our prosperity can be shared. So there must be inclusive growth and sustainable development. Number two, we want Africa that is as an integrated continent and politically united. We want Africa that is of good governance and democracy. We want Africa that is peaceful and secured. We want Africa with strong cultural identity and common heritage. We want Africa whose development is people driven. We want Africa that is strong, united, and influential globally. And so tonight we will concentrate a little bit on aspiration one. And the aspiration one is to have a prosperous Africa based on inclusive growth and sustainable development. And as I've said, before we can have a shared prosperity, our growth has to be inclusive, have to be sustainable. And I want to say that agriculture has a potential for this inclusive growth. The reason is because majority of Africans are farmers. 60% of Africans are farmers. And so when you have growth in the agricultural sector, that growth is going to be inclusive. Now, not only that, majority of agricultural laborers force are women. About 60% of labor force in agriculture are women. So meaning that if you want to think a sector where majority of women are concentrated, you think of agriculture. And that is one of the reasons why the growth in agriculture can be very inclusive, because the women are well represented there. We remember that agriculture is a source of income, and it provides raw material for industrial sectors. It is a source of food and fiber for industry. And another important thing I want to emphasize is that it has a large and longer value chain. When you look at agriculture, right from the land clearing, cultivation, planting, harvesting, transporting, marketing. So at every stage, people can participate. So that makes a growth in that sector very inclusive. That makes it possible for majority of people to participate. If you cannot participate in land clearing, if you cannot participate in planting, you can participate in transportation, you can participate in marketing, you can participate in value addition. So that makes that sector a very important sector, not only to, even globally, not only to Africa, but globally is a sector that has a very long and large value chain where majority of the people can participate. So the growth in agriculture is more sustainable because it is more resilient compared with oil sector. And you remember when there was a lockdown, the price of oil went down. People are not buying oil. People are not buy were not buying petrol. I didn't drive my car for 2 months. But within whether lockdown or no lockdown, I have to eat. So that makes agriculture more resilient, it makes it more sustainable, and it's a sector that is not subject to shocks like all sectors. So this aspiration one is closely related to sustainable development goals one and two. If you are familiar with sustainable development goals, uh, goal one is to reduce poverty. Goal two is to reduce hunger. And so the aspiration one in our agenda is is closely related to sustainable goal one and two. And they are the first, second, number one, number two goals, even sustainable development goals, making poverty reductions of hunger, food security very important sector. And for us, as I've said, it is the area where we can have sustainable growth, it's the area where we can have inclusive growth, it's the area where we can have shared prosperity. So Africa cannot do without agriculture. So what I did is to first of all look at the progress in the agricultural sector, because the goals, the agenda started 2015. Now we want to measure, are we making progress towards that agenda, towards that aspiration? Because as I've told us, it's not only to aspire, we need to perspire to get our desire. It's not only just to have aspiration on the table and nobody is doing anything about it. Nobody is measuring the progress. Nobody is talking about whether we are making progress towards that agenda or not. So what I did was that I used the available data. What is our productivity in 2015 compared to when we have the recent data? So what I did there is to look at the cereal yield, cereal productivity in 2015. I compare it to 2018. That's why we have the recent data. That's about 3 years or 4 years. Now I discovered that our productivity has not increased. It's just less than 1% change. Then what about fertilizer consumption? the fertilizer consumption has increased by about 29%. Now, if you look at other declarations, we have Malabo Declaration, we have Maputo Declaration, we have Abuja declarations. One of the Abuja declarations is that we want to increase our fertilizer consumption from 13% to 13 kilogram per hectare to 50 kilogram per hectare. So as 2015, we were using 15 kilogram per hectare. Now that just increased to about 20 kilogram per hectare. So that's just about just 29% change. So we have not achieved that 50 kilogram per hectare of fertilizer consumption. And when I talk about fertilizer, some people will say, are we not talking about organic farming? Yes, this fertilizer we are talking about, it can be organic fertilizer. In fact, it has been discovered that we need to use right proportions of organic and inorganic fertilizer to get increase in your yield. Now I look at agricultural GDP, because for us to have poverty reduction, our agricultural sector must be growing by about 6% every year. But when I look at compare 2015 to 2018, I discovered that our agricultural GDP is even going down. Meaning that we need to look at that sector properly to make sure that we are not only having the aspiration on the table, we have to make sure that we are making progress to achieve that inclusive growth, that sustainable growth, that shared growth as related to agricultural sector. Another thing I look closely is to look at the progress in agricultural production, right from the time we started the agenda and to the most recent time that we have the data. I look at when you look at Africa again, you discover that our productivity stagnated, is less than 1%. Between 2015 and 2019, our yield just stagnated, less than 1%. Then when you look at the world, the yield, agricultural productivity in the world increased by about 5% within the same period, while our own stagnated at less than 1%. The world agricultural productivity increased by about 5% within the same period, and that of Europe increased about 8% within the same period. Meaning that we still have a challenge in that area. We still have to look critically at our productivity. When you look at production is increasing, fine. But the challenge is that if your productivity is not growing at the rate of your population growth rate, you are going to have a challenge with food security. I need to repeat that. We need to look at our agricultural productivity compared with our population growth rate. The population growth rate in Africa is about 3%, and then our agricultural productivity is less than 1%. So on the long run, we are going to have problem with food insecurity, which I'm going to show later. So it's not only that we're increasing our production, we should emphasize increasing our productivity, because production is like we are putting more land to use. And the time will come when you not have enough land again to cultivate. And the time is coming when you are going to have a constraint with land acquisition. A time is coming where, and we recently we're having that herdsmen clash. Now we are not able to expand the farm size. So the emphasis globally is to increase your productivity using the same quantity of land to produce more, and which we have not achieved in Africa. Now, when I did that analysis country by country, I discovered that Madagascar did not only increase its production and productivity, it even increased their increase in productivity and production is even higher than the global one. Meaning that the production and productivity, agricultural production and productivity in Madagascar is higher than the global average. And I was interested in that. Madagascar is an African country, meaning that Africa can get it right. Meaning that our yield can be even greater than that of the global average. When you look at the yield in Madagascar, it increased about 20% within the same period, while the world increased just about 10%. Meaning that agricultural productivity in Madagascar is even greater and higher than the global average. Now, my interest is that what is Madagascar? What are they doing right? That their productivity is greater than that of global average. Don't forget, it's an African country, but why are they getting it right? So, and that's one thing we need to do. We can learn from each other. There can be a peer review mechanism. Other African countries, you can compare where the other countries are doing better. Then you compare from. We can learn from each other. You don't need to even go to Europe. You don't need to go to US. You don't need to go to America. If you see any African country that are doing it well, then we copy from each other, because this is my brother. We are under almost the same climate, under the same environment. So why is Madagascar doing it well? So I was interested in that. I discovered that in 2018 alone, Madagascar, that was importing rice before, now was able to produce about 40 million tons of rice per year. They became net exporter of rice. So likewise, other sugarcane alone, they have about 3 million tons of sugarcane, about 2.5 million of cassava. The same year, a lot was produced within that period. And if you look at in 1990, they were only producing about 2.4 million tons of rice. Now, in 2000, just within 10 years, they have increased that one to 4 million tons of rice per year, which Nigeria has not even was not able to produce. And that's why Nigeria is importing rice. So the increase in this yield in their rice production came as a result of increase in cultivated area, which is only 15%, and increase in yield, which is about 40%. So what is Madagascar? What are they doing right? How are they able to increase their productivity above the global average? Now, you should be familiar with the fact that the GDP, agricultural GDP in Madagascar is very high, and almost 80% of them are employed in agriculture. But the first interesting thing I want us to look at is that about 60% of their land is under irrigation. And that's number one positive point. While the average irrigated land in Africa is about 7%, the average irrigated land in Madagascar is 16%, meaning that they put more land under irrigation than any other African countries. So more of their land is under irrigation, and this irrigation is not a gigantic project. It's not a too costly project. What they just do is to channel the water from the streams onto their paddy rice, onto their farms, and the farm is irrigated, so they are able to cultivate 2 times in a year, and that's the reason for their increase in productivity. And other African countries can learn that we need irrigation if actually we want our productivities to go up. And I need to point it to us that before now, Madagascar employed IMF and World Bank structural adjustment program, and that led to decline in per capita agricultural output, meaning that this imported policy from foreign countries did not help Madagascar. It was when they came home, they sat down, what can we do? Okay, let's put more land under irrigation, and they were able to do that. Another thing they did, which is very commendable, is that they legislate against slash and burn method that destroy forest and other vegetations. And slash and burn promotes erosions. So what they did is to declare it illegal. Slash and burn, you cut your grass, you cut everywhere, you set it on fire, and then you cultivate and you plant your crops. They discovered that, and which is scientific, that thing destroy forest, it destroy vegetations, it destroy the ecosystem, and it promotes erosion. So what the government did is to declare it illegal in Madagascar. And the government now gave assistance to those cultivators, those farmers that prepare their paddy rice instead, and those practicing tefi. Tefi is that's what they call slash and burn, and they were fined. In fact, in the extreme cases, they imprison you. It is a taboo. It is illegal for you to cut and burn your land before cultivation. So those that are engaged in paddy rice production, those that are engaged in irrigation, they were encouraged. They were given incentive to do that. And those that are involved in slash and burn method, they were declared declared illegal. So two things to learn from Madagascar: we need to go under irrigations. Number two, we need to practice climate smart agriculture, sustainable agricultural system. All this slash and burn does not help the system, because, as I said, it destroys ecosystem, it destroys the organic material on the land, it promotes erosions and the other negative consequences. So I think we need to learn from that. Then the next thing I look at is to look at food insecurity in Africa. As I've said, one of the aspirations is to have inclusive growth, sustainable growth, and I told you that it's related to Sustainable Development Goal 1 and Sustainable Development Goal 2. Sustainable Development Goal 2 is to reduce food insecurity in Africa. So the question I ask myself is that now, since we started the agenda, has the food insecurity reduced in Africa? So when you look at the world, the food insecurity between um, uh, 2015 and 2019, the food insecurity globally stagnated at about 9%. The, the proportions of the people globally in the world that are food insecure remained at about 9%. But in Africa, it increased from 18% to 19% within the same period, meaning that we are not moving towards that food security scenario that we intended to achieve. And I told you that the reason for that is because our productivity, agricultural productivity, stagnated at less than 1%, and then our population growth is increasing at about 3%. So we are producing more children, and we are not producing enough food to for those children. That's the meaning of that, and that is why we are the only region in the world that our food insecurity is increasing. We are the only region in the world that our food insecurity is increasing. Let me elaborate more on that. When you look at food secured in the world in 2015, we compare it to the proportion of people that population of people that are food insecure in the world in 2019. Then we look at the proportion of people that are food insecure in Africa in 2015 compared to food insecure people in 2019. We discovered that in 2019, Africa contribute about 33% of food insecure people in the world. In 2015, our contribution to the food insecure in the world is about 33%, meaning that about one person among the people that are food insecure, I mean, about what am I saying? About one person out of three people that are food insecure in the world, one of them is an African. So that proportion has increased in 2019 to instead from 33% to 36%. And we need to know that's a challenge. That's the area where we have a challenge. The food insecurity in Africa is growing worse. So, meaning that there are some people that are well fed, there are some that are not well fed, and that's not inclusive growth. When we have about almost 20% of our people that don't have food to eat, enough food to eat, that is not a shared prosperity. That is not inclusive growth. So that's the area where we have challenge. And as I've said, the reason is because our agricultural productivity stagnated and our population growth is increasing. Now, there are cost implications to this aspiration. Before the agenda 2015, the African governments have agreed that they will allocate 10% of their expenditure to agriculture, 10%. So, because that was what was done in Asia, for Asia to have the agricultural revolution they had, they discovered that they allocated 10% of their total expenditure to agriculture. So the governments of African governments thought it wise that they need to do the same thing. So now the agreement among them is that they will allocate 10% of their total expenditure to agriculture. The question I ask is that what is the situation now? Now the situation is that the share of total expenditure to agriculture in Africa is about 2%, meaning that we still have a long way to go we are very far from 10%. And that may be the reason for declined productivity. And I've told you that the declined productivity is positively related to food insecurity. So we need to not only to have aspiration, not only to have agenda, we need to look at the cost of this agenda. If we want to increase productivity in agriculture, we need to allocate 10% of our total expenditure to agriculture. And that is exactly what they agreed. And the literature shows that the country that tried to do that, they were doing better agriculturally. They were doing better profitably. And so that's a challenge for us to make sure that the African government, we have to look at what proportion of our expenditure do we give to agriculture. Another thing where I look at is to look at the share of this agricultural GDP that we spend on research and development in African agriculture. Because if you want to increase our productivity, we have to increase our research and development, because it's through research that we get, you know, better yield. It is through research we discover how to produce more better. We discover the best method to use, the type of seed we need to use, the quality of the seed we need to use, the type of time we have to plant, the water systems and all that. So research and development is very important. And if you look at countries that are doing well agriculturally, they allocated large proportion of their agricultural expenditure to research and development. So in the case of Africa, we now ask ourselves, what proportions of our agricultural GDP do we allocate to research and development in agriculture? It's still less than 1%. It's still less than 1%. And if you look at Mauritius allocated almost 5%. And that's another country to copy. I told you that when you talk about productivity increase, we need to look at Madagascar. Now, when we want to look at expenditures, allocations, and reallocations, we need to look at Mauritius. If you, we may not be able to compare ourselves to European countries, we may not be able to compare ourselves to America, but we can compare ourselves with Mauritius. If Mauritius can allocate about 5% of their agricultural GDP to research and development in agriculture, we need to do the same thing. The meaning of that is that it is this money is taken out of what agriculture is contributing to the economy. Then you take certain proportion of it, allocate it to research and development, quality research and development, not only to be paid staff, not only to maintain offices, but quality research and development. And so Mauritius is doing well in that regard, and that's a country for Africa to that we can compare ourselves with, we can copy from them. Now let me end up with conclusions and some recommendation. As I've said, agricultural sectors should be the focus to promote inclusive growth and sustainable development. And I've explained that based on the level of employment in agriculture, about 60% of Africans are employed in agricultural sector. About 60% of the women, the labor force in agriculture are women. And I told you that it has a large and longer value chain, right from clearing, planting, cultivation, harvesting, value addition, transportations, and marketing. So at one point or the other, you see people that will be able to participate. If I want to reduce, if you want to reduce poverty, you need to do something to agricultural sector. You see, many people are being employed there. Increase in agricultural income, increase in productivity will translate to this shared prosperity among those people. Now, the African government should encourage sustainable and climate smart agriculture to increase agricultural productivity. I told us about the case of Madagascar, where they increased the irrigation sector. I mean, irrigation aspect of the agricultural activities. About 60% of their land is irrigated, compared with about 7% as average for Africa. Not only that, I told you that their productivity increased because they discourage bush burning, all this slash and burn practice. So for Africa, we need to think of sustainable agricultural practices. We need to think of climate smart agricultural activities. And then we need to legislate. We need to discourage all these bush burning, environmental negative activities. And I told you that the example is Madagascar. Now, African governments should give priority not only to the quantity of government spending on agriculture, but to its quality. Now, we have said about 10% target. That is a noble goal. But more importantly, because you can increase your 10% and most of the money is spent on recurrent expenditure just to pay the salaries of civil servants that are working in the agricultural ministry. So, but we should think about the quality of the spending. The quality in the sense that what proportion do we allocate to research and development? What proportion do we allocate to irrigation? In fact, we have discovered that in the agricultural sector in Africa, most of the money goes to subsidy. And a lot of corruption is in the subsidy sectors. We have discovered that these subsidies does not get to intended farmers. So if there are leakages along the subsidy line, so that is why it's recommended that the subsidies should not even be the way out. Irrigation. And when we are talking about Madagascar, we didn't talk much about the subsidy in Madagascar. We talk about the irrigation. Then Mauritius, we talk about the research and development. So somebody even said that even if the budget, if agricultural budget in Africa is not increased, if what they do is to reallocate the budget in favor of irrigation, in favor of research and development, agricultural productivity in Africa will still increase, even with the same budget. So that we should think of reallocating our budget in favors of those developmental aspects of agricultural financing, like irrigations, research and development, rural development, rather than on those subsidy, on those recorded expenditure that will not get to the intended beneficiary. So I've said that the African government should not only try to meet the target of 10% of government expenditure devoted to agriculture, they should also reallocate agricultural expenditure to favor agricultural research and development, irrigations, etc. Because sometimes it may be difficult to get that 10% target of 10%, because the government still want to spend money on education, they want to spend money on health, they want to spend money on other development. So, but even if we are not getting up to 10% target, we should make sure that we improve the quality of our allocation to agriculture, so that to favor research and development, irrigations, and etc. And they gave us the example of Mauritius that allocated about 5% of agricultural GDP to agricultural research and development. And they should be emulated. We have two countries that are mentioned regularly here, Madagascar, and then we have Mauritius. Now, the good thing is that these countries that are in Africa, and if any African country can be doing it well, then we can learn from each other. We can copy from each other. If my brother can do it well, I will be able to do it well. Not only in the aspiration one, in all the aspirations. If you have any country that if Rwanda is doing it well in one area, then we copy from Rwanda. If Malawi is the one doing it well in the area of democracy, we copy Malawi. So if Ivory Coast is doing well in the area of health, education sector, we copy from each other. I think that's a way to learn. And more importantly, we should not only have aspirations, we should have perspirations. It is then that we can get our desire met. So there should be a constant review of this agenda. There should be a constant measures of this agenda. There should be a kind of peer review mechanism of this agenda. And all of us should be committed to it, that we want to get this thing done. We should not sit there and think that 2063 is still far. No, we have spent almost 5 years now since we started, and we have discovered that our productivity stagnated. We have discovered that our even food insecurity is getting worse, and the expenditure structures has not matched what we intend to do. So all those things we should think and sit down and properly reallocate and readjust ourselves to make sure that this target we have set for ourselves, we will achieve it. I know it's achievable. If some of our countries are doing well already, then other countries will need to wake up to match up so that all of us will get this agenda done. Thank you very much. Then we can interact together.
Thank you very much, sir, for this amazing presentation. And I took some messages back home. My message is that if we have aspiration, we should have
Inspiration.
Perspiration, amazing. Welcome you all, ladies and gentlemen, for joining our conversation today. And the conversation is deeply in the content and, of course, the cost and the challenges in achieving the Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. And today, Professor Alabi has elaborated intensely in the different agendas. We saw the seven agendas and the seven aspirations, and he emphasized today on aspiration number one. For those who want to know more about Agenda 2063, because it is our agenda shaped by the African people for the African people, then please Google that Agenda 2063 and you get more details. But of course, you can always join our conversations every Monday and you will be enlightened about Agenda 2063. Sir, I have a question for you. You mentioned the example of Madagascar. I welcome you, Mary DeCaro. And Mary DeCaro is asking the question, how can other African countries learn from Madagascar? And of course, the other country was Mauritius when our leaders are only looking at Europe for the example. So maybe give us a step by step how we can really copy from these two African countries you mentioned.
Yeah, thank you very much, madam. I think education is very important. Myself, I didn't know that Madagascar is doing well. So what I did was that I was doing my analysis. I look at the growth, the development in each of the country, 55 countries, and I discovered that this country is having productivity that is even higher than the global average. Then I now went down deeper to look at their secrets. So that was when I got to know that, oh, this country, number one, when they were using IMF, World Bank policy, their per capita productivity went down. It was when they threw away the structural adjustment program, the liberalization program, they went down. And then they were doing what they know how to do. Then the productivity jumped from about 2.4 million metric tons of rice to about 4 million metric tons. Meaning that some of our African countries are doing well and we need to learn from each other. Our education is important. Myself, about 2 weeks ago, I didn't know this. If not that, I went to find out. It was in the process of my research. I like to work with figures. I don't like to talk. If I say something, I want to look at what does the figure says. That's the way I was trained. So it was in the process, and I discovered that, oh, this Madagascar, it has this level of productivity. Then the next thing is that I now pursue it to look for why. And I got those two reasons: that number one, they were doing irrigations better than every other African country. Number two, they rejected IMF, World Bank policies, and they went to do what they know how to do better. And they were even better globally in terms of productivity than any country in Africa. So what we need to do is that there is tendency to think that Europe, they are the only one that know how to do it better. There is tendency to think that America is the only one that know how to do better. I think let's orientate ourselves. In all some of these things, there are some of African countries that are doing it well. Then let's copy from each other. And my own is that if my brother in Liberia, my brother in Cameroon can be doing it, I can do it. So
Mm.
just learn what is your formula, and
Mm.
when we learn that formula, then before you know, you just discover that we are doing well. And let me give you a story. When I was in secondary school, when we did the first exam we did, I took number four. They used to give us position in school then. So one, two, three, I was number four. I was surprised. How can I be number four? I just believe that I have to be number one. So there are two boys. They are from the same family, Elijah and Daniel. Elijah took number one, Daniel took number two. I think I took number four. So what I did was that I woke up very. They were living in another village, far from my own village. It's about 3 kilometers to my village. So I left my village. I went to their village very early in the morning on Saturday. What I wanted to do is to study them. So I discovered that they were doing something that I was not doing. When they wake up in the morning, the first thing they did is to read. They read their physics, they read everything. But me, what I used to do is to wash my clothes. Your parents will tell you to wash your clothes to get ready. So when I went back to my village, every Saturday when I wake up, I have to read maybe up to 12 o'clock before washing my clothes. The next exam we did, I was ahead of them. In fact, I entered university before any of them. So what I'm trying to say is that we just have to, there's what they call peer review mechanism. African were doing that before, but I don't know. We just forgot about it. It does not mean that Europe is the best. It does not mean that America is the best. We need to now think about ourselves. There's one of our countries in Africa that is doing it well. Then we just copy from that, and then we can produce anybody's result.
Thank you very much, Professor. To summarize what you said education is important. And I want
Yeah,
to come to the fact that education, you don't mean education here by going to the school system again, because that's where we have learned all these things, but you mean the self research
yeah,
that you did. And so getting skills for particular and specific purposes. And you also mentioned the fact that, to paraphrase what you said, that we have to solve our problems with our own means. So
yeah.
the African problems be solved by Africans
The
in with
African
their
way.
own method and their own approaches. Thank
Yes.
you very much, sir. I have another question also from this time body for Elvis. He is asking, how can we reconcile the fact that in this era of mechanized farming, with more youth indulging into agriculture, our food insecurity keeps increasing?
Yeah, that's a very challenging one, and myself, I've been thinking about that. I'm still thinking that we'll make a presentation. And what I want to do with that presentation is to look at what are the factors that are responsible for food insecurity.
Mhm.
I did a research before. Later, maybe I will present it. So, to reduce food insecurity is not only to be producing more. Number one, I talk about productivity. And another thing is that even if your productivity is increasing and your fertility is increasing at the same time, you still have problem with food insecurity. And so we need to a kind of education when it comes to family planning. I know some people may not agree with that, but even if you are, because for example now our agricultural productivity is 1%. We are growing by 1%, for example. It's even less than 1%, it's 0.71. So, but let's say 1%. And then our fertility rate is about 3%. So now the food you are producing, we are producing more children than we are not producing enough food to take care of that children. We can maintain our fertility, we can maintain our the number of children. There's no problem with that. But we have to make sure that our fertility it go with our productivity. If we are producing children at 3%, we must our productivity too must grow about more than 3%. If our productivity does not grow up more than 3% and we are growing our producing children at 3%, we will see a problem with food insecurity because we have more mouths than we can feed. And so I think we need just to make a choice. Number one, we know that we have to increase our productivity, but that does not tell the whole story. We need to talk about our family planning. So the average family in Africa is about six. It's about six. So we should not deceive ourselves. Children are good, but those children, if you don't have food to feed them, we are creating liability. And so we can talk about that another time. But myself, I was really challenged that why is it that food production does not solve our food insecurity problem? It's because there are other factors that are responsible for that.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you so very much. To paraphrase, you said it is important that we not only produce more, but that we should be able to have a good proportion balance from the fertility to productivity
Yeah.
so that we can be able to feed everybody appropriately. Thank you very much. Um, one other question I have. This one is from my side. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for sharing your questions. If you are here and you have any other question, please just send it online, and we're going to answer your questions. Sir, you compared before the agenda 2030, that's the Sustainable Development Goals, and the agenda 2063, that is the Africa we want. When you merge these both agendas together, what comes out of it? What do you think will be by 2063 if we have both agendas working hand in hand?
And I think they, as I've said, Sustainable Development Goal 1 and 2 is directly related to our own aspiration one. In fact, I can say that Sustainable Development Goal is a short time step to our own Agenda 2063. It's just a short term means
Mm-hmm.
to get to where we are going. Because if we are able to work on our poverty rate, we reduce our poverty, we reduce hunger, then we are working towards our own aspiration one.
Mm-hmm.
And the good thing with the agenda is that it can be Africanly domesticated. Now we know this one belongs to us. Then how can we get it done in African way? What approaches are we don't need to rely on Europe. We don't need to rely on America. We now domesticate our own aspiration to achieve it. And mind you, I discovered that even with sustainable development goal like Germany, they have their own sustainable development goal apart from the one the that global one.
Yeah.
They came back home, they now developed their own, related to their own. They still call it Sustainable Development Goal, but German Sustainable Development Goal. So
Mm-hmm.
likewise, we are doing the same thing for us in Africa. Now our own is now Agenda 2063. It's a long time goal, but Sustainable Development Goal will still help us to achieve that agenda. But the good thing is that we should be monitoring it, we should be measuring our progress, we should be looking at where our challenges, where are the weak points, which country are doing well, which one are not doing well. Those that are not doing well, we can encourage them to move towards that goal so that all of us will achieve the agenda at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, sir. Another question from Mr. Mbolifor Elvis. Thank you, sir. He's asking Madagascar, from your presentation, is well situated with many water sources. Would they have been the highest country in irrigation if they were found in areas with water scarcity?
Yeah, that's a very intelligent one. But water can be sourced. Water can be sourced. You can dig a borehole, and this one is calling our attention to the fact that water is very important. The good thing with irrigation is that it will allow you to produce crops 2 times in a year.
Mm,
Unlike most of our African country, after the rainy season, nothing again. Now,
mm,
now if you can have that water regime that allow you to produce 2 times in a year, then you are better off. Not only that, during the dry season, the disease incidence, those things that are key crops, they are reduced during the dry season. So when you are able to now get water for your crop, those crops, they will not be much attacked with pests and diseases. So you still have that advantage. So the yield with irrigation will even be higher than the one with rain fed. Apart from the fact that the water regime, you can have water today, then if the rain does not fall, the whole crop can be destroyed. But with irrigation, I think there's a sustainable supply of water. Now the high opening is that we need irrigation. Then how can we source for water? We can decide to dig a borehole. The community can gather together. Then even the international organization can decide to help them, that we need water to do that. But we need to be aware that we need that irrigation facilities, and it can be done.
sir. Thank you very much. My next question would be on domestication. For many, we started the Agenda 2063 2016, and we have been talking about that, and we have the impression that it is not yet known in Africa, and that people with the African heritage have not yet understood the importance of this agenda, and worse still, the people in the diaspora that are really doing an amazing job still don't know the Agenda 2063, or better say, have not come in touch with Agenda 2063. What could that, why is it so, sir? And how can we own this agenda?
That's one. Number one, I want to really appreciate this organization for doing that, because myself, I was not aware of Agenda 2063, and I've done a lot of analysis on sustainable development goal. I was ashamed of myself to get to know that the agenda through you. So, but since then, I've been telling other people today, say, is there anything like that? So, I think we need to start from somewhere, and we are starting well. So, number one, we need to really know what it's all about. And that is why African governments still have to do a lot. Uh, and that the publicity level is very low. If we that are seems to be educated are not aware, imagine the farmers in Africa. And so we are starting in a very small way, but this thing is going a long way. At least all the people that have contact with me now, I've told them about our agenda. Even professors, I told them about agenda 2063. They are not aware. And it was because when I became aware, I have to go and read it myself, study what these things are all about. I said, this is very fantastic. I think the African Union, African Development Bank, all the organizations in Africa, they need to promote these things. People are not yet aware, but we are starting a small way, and we don't know how far this one will go. So this is a very good platform for us to start with. And I know that since then, there's going to be increase in the awareness, and then people will not be able to domesticate. It's what you know, that you not be able to domesticate. And then just look at me now. If not that there's any agenda like that, I will not sit down and begin to analyze data. I will not sit down and begin to talk about Madagascar now. I will not sit down and think to talk about Mauritius. So it can start it's just like a mustard seed. But before you know, the tree will grow, and many people will come and survive on it. Although they may say that, oh, they got to know it now, they may not even credit the source, but it doesn't matter. What is important is that at least they are aware, and then we are doing something about it together.
Thank you very much, sir. What's important is that they should be aware, and you have been aware. And you, I remember you were in Nigeria, and you said, "I went through it all," and I
Yeah.
said to one of our colleagues, "Oh, now that professor have gone through this book, be
Yeah.
sure that the conversation will be a different one."
Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah.
for having it and
Thank you.
owning the conversation.
Thank you very much.
Mm. So we are almost rounding up. It was an
Yeah.
amazing talk, an amazing conversation, and now we are understanding that it is not about the quantity but quality, even in productivity. And we also understand that it's not just about the aspiration, but it's also the perspiration of it. We also understand that we have to own this agenda. We understand that we have to solve the African problems should be solved the African way, and their own methods should be used in solving the problem. We also understand that we have to re-educate our minds and learn the skills that we need to learn so as to be able to achieve Agenda 2063. Your last words, sir, before we leave to the people. A young person is listening to you, and so speak in the language that he or she will understand what it really means to have food security.
Yeah. I think before we get to the issue of food security, the good news is that we have some African countries that are doing well. I was really surprised that we can have African country that their agricultural productivity is higher than the global average. I was really, the thing really shook me. And that tell us the fact that Africa can get it right. We have the resources, we have the resources, we have the materials, we have the people. We should not look down on ourselves. We should not look down on ourselves. We should know that we can do it. And that's why this aspiration is very, very important, that we need to aspire to get there. And I still want to emphasize that not only in agriculture, even if in the democracy, if you have African country that is democratically stable over 20 years, 30 years, and they are doing well, then other African country we can say you can go and learn from your brother. How are they getting it right? If it's in the health sector, if Rwanda is doing it very well, go and learn from your brother. Then that's how to learn. And then it will be easy because you are my brother. You say this is what I do. There is no magic about it. It's not because my skin is white. It's not we are black. I am black. You can do it. So I think that's a message. Then for food insecurity, as I've said, we need to increase our productivity from the level we are now. Then another thing is that we need to educate ourselves on family planning. Family planning. There is no need to be bringing children on board when we don't have food for them, when you cannot send them to school, when you cannot do you cannot help them. It's a liability. So we should send us signal very right, because I discovered that we can be increasing our agricultural productivity and we are producing more than children, more than the food we are producing. There is going to be a problem. But let's end up on this good note that we have African countries that are doing it well, and then we will learn from those African countries, and our continent is going to be very, very great. We have everything. We have resources in all these African countries, and it's just for us to harness those resources and to learn. Just like Madam said, it's not just to go back to school, but there are some things we can learn from each other, knowledge base. Then we'll say, okay, we can do this, and we are going to do it. I believe strongly that our future is very bright, and we are going to make it all together.
Thank you very much, Professor Alabi. He believes strongly that the future is bright and we are going to make it all together. I also believe that the future is bright and that if Madagascar and other parts of Africa can make it well, then we can as well make it. Today, we have come to the end of our program, the Agenda 2063. If you want to know more about this agenda, like I said before, please Google it and you'll get all the information. Do not forget to subscribe to all our channels in Instagram and the Sampa Global TV YouTube and of course on Facebook, and make sure to subscribe, to send your comments, and if you have any questions, do not forget to send your questions. Tomorrow we're going to be meeting again with my colleague Batimona Abeke on other social matters. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow and share the link. On Thursday, we're going to be having racism talk, and on Sunday, we will be right back here again with a business conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to an end of our program tonight, and we thank you so very much for giving us the gift of your time. And God bless you. Bye bye.